I swear, California is a shithole, man. I don't know how people live here, but it's always some dumb politician that wants to come up with some stupid law like this. Always trying to be the person who is in charge of your life or in charge of someone's life. There's always somebody. Some of these ladies like need a hobby. It's typically why I don't agree with a lot of these female politicians because they're always up in somebody's business. And so this SoCal lawmaker introduces a bill to clarify what is considered non-condom removal as sexual battery, right? So if you're in the middle of sex and you take the condom off, or if the condom comes off, you can now be eligible for sexual battery. And of course, this is just another law. This came out yesterday. This article came out yesterday. This is just another law that, of course, always attacks business. And ain't nobody out here sleeping with this lady, but it's always someone that looks like this, that's always trying to intrude upon the sexual lives of those who actually are having sex. But since she ain't getting anybody, she's gonna make it miserable for everybody else. And of course, damn Democrat. This is the non-consensual removal of a condom during sexual intercourse could be an act of sexual battery under a bill introduced Monday by Assemblywoman Christina Garcia. California's civil code currently characterizes sexual battery as someone who acts with an intent to cause a harmful or offensive contact with an intimate body part of another, and as a result commits a sexually offensive act. The perpetrator is liable for damages. And again, what is the harm, as it says here, that is being done under this act? And of course, because it's all about feelings, this is why people like this in law do so well. And it's why when you look back in biblical times and back throughout history, typically men were the ones who were in charge of most societies, because men will use rational thinking, right? They'll use rational thinking and not shit that is based off of how do you feel, because you can make an untold amount of laws and rules and regulations just based off of how you feel, because individuals like this, their feelings change from one perspective to the next, and of course by the moment. It says the bill AB 453 says would add a provision that says a person commits sexual battery if they cause contact between a penis from which a condom has been removed and the intimate part of another who did not verbally consent to the condom being removed. Experts say there are currently no civil or penal code nationwide that define what is called stealthing, as the practice is known as a crime. And it's like, please, man, half the time, most of these women don't even tell men to use condoms. I mean, it don't even matter the educational level. It's like I can count on one hand the number of women that have asked me to use a condom during sex out of the hundreds that I've slept with. It's like it just doesn't even happen. Like women don't even take the initiative at all. It's always up to the man to utilize and protect himself. But this is just one more thing that you now have to worry about as a guy. So now it's not even that you can come back and they can say that the consent, right, to sex wasn't there, right? You can have sex and then she can turn around and say, no, I did have sex, but then in the middle of sex I changed my mind, I didn't consent, right? Even though she may not verbalize that during the act. So now you have to worry about if she takes off the condom, or she can just say that the condom came up, because again, how do you prove any of this, right? How do you prove any of this? How do you go into front of a judge and now you have to prove, yes, Your Honor, we did have consensual sex. She says that we had consensual sex, but now she says that the condom came off and she wants damages awarded as a result of battery. And it's like, and again, this is why I stopped dating westernized women. Spent whenever I wanted to travel, because it's so easy meeting women, even when you're traveling. This is why I just stopped dating. in the West. There's no point, especially if you're a guy, and you're busy, you've got a business or you've got a good job. Typically, what will get most women, if you look like you're a man of means, it's not difficult meeting women. But this just puts you more and more and more at risk of dealing with American women in that way, right? And this is I just want people to say it, this is the purpose. You might look at these rules and regulations and be like, this is stupid. It makes absolutely no sense. But it does according to the American government, because their purpose in creating a lot of these rules around interactions between men and women, overwhelmingly, the vast majority of men innately have a desire to protect women. It's the way men were raised. Two, it's biology. On a very rare occasion, you will come across an individual who will act abusively towards women. But even if most men don't even know the woman, like I don't know how many videos there's been like on YouTube of just like some random guy doing a pretend video of his girl hitting him, and then him hitting her, and like everybody ignores him getting beat up by the woman. But then the moment he turns around and like pushes her or shoves her, there's like, I don't know, like 5 people ready to pound on him, right? Innately, most men overwhelmingly act in a way that is protective towards women. And so things like this, of course, are designed to keep men and women away from each other, right? Just like the marital laws. And the reason being is because it's much easier to manipulate women than it is men. Overwhelmingly, men use their brains and use a sense of fairness. They use rationality, and it's much easier to manipulate individuals who typically rely on their feelings than it is for someone who relies more so on clear thinking ability, right? And that's why there are two counterparts. Where men typically might lack a bit of feeling, you have the female as your counterpart, where women can act sometimes very emotionally and not utilize a sense of rationale. They have their counterpart in the male to basically help balance them. But in most relationships that we see today, is the government basically attacking, primarily instituting laws and practices that drive men away from wanting to be providers and sources of protection for women. And it's because the government wants to be that for the women, so that women feel less of a need to rely upon men, individual men, right? And so instead they rely collectively on men via the government. And this is one of the ways, of course, that the government controls population. Much harder to manipulate families where there's a strong male in the home. And of course, these are always the purposes of many of these laws, either knowingly or unknowingly. It always goes in that direction. Like, for example, the marital laws and the divorce laws. The divorce laws, especially the ones that have been changed, are highly geared towards pulling resources away from men for the purpose of giving it to the state, because every dollar that is exchanged via spousal support or child support, the federal government basically backs it. Kind of like the easiest way to understand how that works is basically like a matching pension system, right? So for every dollar that you put into your pension, your boss basically matches it up to a certain amount. And the government in terms works that same way. So if you were just to say, I'm going to provide for my kid, or I'm going to provide for my ex-wife, the government doesn't want that. Why? Because the government doesn't get the kickback from the federal government. So the lawyers, the judges, the system in terms of the state is incentivized to basically throw men under the bus to extract resources from them, to give those resources to the ex-wife or to the child, so that the state can basically increase their revenue. The whole system is designed this way for the purpose of ripping families apart and extracting wealth from men. They don't do this to women because typically women don't go out there and extract wealth from the world. It's overwhelmingly done by men. And so this is a system that is basically designed against the people. It's designed against families for the purpose of keeping families apart, for the purpose of being able to extract resources. And of course, it's very hard. That's why most of the men that I talk to, I tell them, do not get married, do not have relationships in the West, because in most Western nations, this is a sort of direction that they lean towards, and it's purposefully. This is not done for the purpose of protecting women, because men already do this innately, overwhelmingly. Men act in a way to preserve women. Even when nations get toppled, and they kill off all the men, what do? Do they kill all the women? No, they keep the women, right? And this is an unfortunate reality that we find ourselves in. And this is why if you want to have a family, if you want to have some sort of a successful relationship, overwhelmingly you should do it more than likely in your country of familial origin, as long as it's not a westernized country. Earn your living here, you save up money, you invest, and then you live abroad. There is absolutely no reason for a man, especially living in a democratic state, to want to have a relationship. This is far, far too much risk for very little reward when it comes to dating women in the West.